You're with Bruce and Steve. It's time for Purple Haze, and we have joining us for part two of our part two special with Peter Koppes. Peter is on the phone and joining us from New South Wales. Peter, welcome back to Purple Haze.
Thank you, Bruce. It's nice I'm down on the Central Coast instead of on the Sunshine Coast for a change. And so everyone knows I'm formerly from the church.
Correct.
Okay.
And
got to announce that.
That's
I put a lot of work into that, you know.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And we're here. Last time on part one, we spoke about your solo career, and we spoke about some songs that you had written and sung with the church. But this time we're here to talk about something that Steve and I are very excited about.
Indeed.
Which is your new project, new band called Syncretism, and the album called Lone Drifters. And
with a question mark.
With a question mark at the end.
Indeed.
And what's exciting about it for us, and no doubt for you as well, is that you have a partner in the band who you used to be in a band with Steve Kilby in Canberra, which was the band before the church, which was Baby Grande. So tell us how this project all came to be.
Well, the new Syncretism project, yes, is with Dave Scotland, and quite, I don't know if it's poignant is the way to describe it, but Dave Scotland was the most amazing guitarist in Australia, in Canberra. That band, Baby Grande, was had a bit of a gossamer opportunity in existence. We ended up supporting bands like AC/DC on their first Australian tour, the Skyhooks, and because we had a manager lady there who knew Harry M. Miller, and we came up to Sydney and played at Checkers. So we had a great opportunity. We recorded for a publisher in Sydney as well. So we were, and we were a glam rock band, and pretty much Canberra musicians were not very impressed with us, although Dave Scotland had already been in a band as a lead singer called Frosted Glass, and he'd established himself as having a great, guitar reputation, particularly, and he was kind of remarkable in that he played a right-handed guitar, left-handed, so he had to turn it. He was playing it upside down, so he kind of looked like Hendrix, but Hendrix had a re-strung guitar, whereas Dave was playing the strings upside down.
Oh wow!
Really? Wow!
Yeah.
That's
So there's a few people. I think Freddie King might have. There's a couple of guitarists who play like that. So it's inimitable to play exactly what they did. But he actually taught me lead guitar. I'd been a drummer and had actually gotten into the band Baby Grande when it was a previous incarnation called Beyond Beavers, or then Precious Little. And they already had a drummer, and then they replaced that drummer with another drummer without telling the original drummer he wasn't in the band. So they ended up with two drummers, but the original drummer was so bad they still kicked him out, but they liked the idea of two drummers. And the original drummer we knew, so he invited me to come and be in the drum. Well, actually, I was rehearsing in the same rehearsal studios they have, or was actually a Christian Presbyterian church hall that I discovered through my friend being the drummer in this band. So we were in rehearsing one day, and I was playing drums. Oh, actually, I was playing guitar in that band. We were like a prog rock, Santana-y, Yes type band, but we were jamming away. They weren't very good musicians, particularly just Buddy and I was only starting to learn guitar because I'd been a drummer. And I did a drum solo impromptu on our drummer's drum kit when they'd arrived early for their, Beyond Beavers arrived early for their rehearsal, and they seemed to be so impressed with it. When they kicked out the other drummer, they invited me to join their band. It was actually at a Spectrum concert, if you know about that great 70s band. Yeah, Mike Rudd, yeah. And so I joined that band as a drummer, and I loved playing with two drummers. It's quite common these days for bands to have two drummers, actually, and and it was a glam rock band, so that was pretty good. And then Steve was the singer from the church, was just the bass player at that time and kind of a co-writer, but they were doing original music, and I was pretty impressed with that. And then they kicked out the guitarist. Well, actually, the singer left when they kicked out the drummer because he was offended. So Steve, the singer from the church, became the singer for that band, and then he was playing bass at that time, and then they kicked out the guitarist, and I took over on guitar.
Mm.
And at the same time as they invited Dave Scotland, from whose band had ended, to join the band, and I think we knew him through a couple of connections, but the bass player that came into that band as well was a friend of mine, who so Steve became the lead singer, and my friend became the bass player. I became the guitarist, and they invited Dave Scotland to join this band if he shaved his beard off. and which was impudent of us, because he was a pretty well-established musician, and but he liked that we were doing original music, because a lot of bands, and there was very few bands in Canberra doing original music at that time, unless they were doing prog rock stuff. And there was one amazing band actually called Oak, who was a great prog rock band, but generally the other ones were just mostly doing covers and blues and things like that. So that's how Baby Grande formed, and Dave Scotland shared all of his lead guitar capacities with me. He was a very generous person, and we all were pretty good friends,
Mm.
And then I left that band because it was just, I'd go and travel around Australia, and wasn't particularly happy. I mustn't have been. I reflect on it a lot. When you're young, and I wasn't sure. I didn't necessarily enjoy it somehow. And then they got a deal with EMI, who decided not to follow through with the deal. And funny enough, they said that the singer couldn't sing. But and so Dave and the drummer and my friend the bass player, they formed another band instead, and which didn't really go anywhere. And as much talent as Syncretism you can tell from the songwriting, because it's mostly Dave Scotland's songwriting,
Yes.
with my lyrics, and I just produced it or co-produced it with him, and helped him arrange it. And it's incredible that in all that time he's never really been prominent as a musician. He's lived in Sydney for most of the time, as well as we did. But I don't know why he never. But I might have mentioned this before. I believe in partnerships, like the Lennon-McCartney, Jagger Richards, and a lot of musical entities or anything in life is when you have a partnership.
Yes,
true.
And I never felt a real strong partnership with anyone either until Dave and I reconvened for this Syncretism project, which was born out of him coming up to the Central Coast to reacquaint with the drummer from Baby Grande, who lived on the Central Coast, and I'd been visiting here because the rest of my family moved here from Canberra. And we, out of that meeting, Dave wrote some music and sent it to me, and he said, "Why don't you, add something to this?" So I added some guitar to it, and then I said, "What about some lyrics?" And I had a feeling that he wasn't going to do them, and I said, "Well, I'm quite, open to them, because I, enjoy writing lyrics, and I've done my 5.5 albums and written lyrics for the church albums, or the songs that I sang on the church." And he said, "Go ahead." And I said, "It might be about someone we both know." and that's how that song, Their Song, came about, which was like a compassionate leaving song. I never like to be emotional. I like to write songs like reporting them like a journalist, that you don't inject it with your emotions, but you just report it. And that way you've got a bit of a mirror for yourself, and it's not a horrible memory if you have to play those songs every night, that you feel, that it's, you can keep reflecting on it. And, arbitrarily, if you like, and which I think was very successful. And then he kept sending me songs. Actually, I sent him a lyrics for a poem that I said, I don't know, I just woke up and wrote this poem called Lucifer Waits, which was like, you're going to hell, because I was just annoyed with some of the world politics and how, people were taking advantage of their societies, and he stuck it on a song and sang it on a song and sent it back, and I just, I'm not sure. That's pretty weird. And it's become one of the more popular songs on the album. It's kind of a straight-ahead rocker kind of thing. We've tried to, it sounds a bit more gothic, and I suppose, a lot of Satanism in goth, or at least the image of Satanism. Like people think Black Sabbath was a Satanist band, but because Tommy Iommi, the guitarist, was wearing black and a crucifix, but he's a very Christian man, actually. Same as U2. People don't realise U2 is the biggest Christian band in the world.
That's true.
One's Protestant, one's Catholic, and between The Edge and Bono, again, another strong partnership.
Indeed.
Anyway, so Syncretism is, for me, the poignancy is that Dave and I could very well have been in a band all this time together, and yet after my leaving of the church and thinking, I had to leave that relationship because it wasn't bearing fruit anymore, and I think I was actually getting disdainful treatment in the band too, or lack of appreciation of the efforts that I did a lot, because I'm like the executive manager for the band, and thought that I was saving them from a lot of diabolical financial disasters repeatedly, and had proven my worth there, but that didn't seem to be have much bearing on consideration from me. And not that I need consideration, I like to be left alone, but they wouldn't leave me alone. Seriously, I won't go into it. But so Syncretism is like, and go on.
I was just going to say, I think there's always something good that comes out of a situation that's not so positive, and this album is an absolute joy to listen to, and it speaks volumes, and you and Dave should be really proud of what you've done, whether that's the right word or not. But it's a fantastic album, and it's worthy of a track by track Purple Haze breakdown. Exactly.
And we're really glad about that, because I was always disappointed that most people don't expect an album to be full of great songs. Even a Beatles album, there's kind of like often a bit of a dud. But Dave and I are both, not surprised, but pleasantly surprised at how it just came together so quickly and easily, and it became obvious that we just have a kindred spirit, because I'm writing the lyrics and he's got the perfect kindred spirit to present them. And I basically got it from him singing the melodies with a mock lyric or style of things, like where certain words will pop out and unintentionally, and I'd sometimes work the verse out by taking a couple of these words and his emotional quantity of the sound of the music and his melodies to try and voice him, because I might have said before I didn't write any more albums after, a while, because I didn't really have much more to say. So I felt like I was his voice in a way. And then I realised that it was both our voices, and every song will have a parallel with it's a mechanical thing and an emotional thing about our achievement of surviving all of this time. Like, he hasn't had success on a popular level with his creativity, and I had a certain amount, which people seemed to, but I didn't feel very attached to a lot of the success of the band, because I didn't feel it was my manifesto anyway. And my solos that worked certainly didn't, although it's critically acclaimed. I got my first album was reviewed on Billboard magazine in America and in the recommended column, and none of the other members of the band have ever had an opportunity like that. So it's really the whole thing is very poignant. That
Sorry, Pete, did Dave still continue to write and do music during those years?
Yeah, absolutely. And he produced other people and recorded for other people, and he got his skills recording are amazing. He has, played the bass on most of the songs. I played on one, and he's curated the drums for all of the tracks and keyboards and programming. He's just a consummate musician, and we have so much in common like that too, because we both are capable of playing all of the instruments that are on the album, and whether he does it or I does it, it doesn't really matter. But we have a perfect syncretism. Not a syncretism. The word I was going to mention, syncretism was a word that just popped up because in a music reference book, which is supposedly when you take a musical idiom and add to it. And then I looked it up and realised that it was actually more related to religions and combining things like paganism and Christianity, as in Halloween. That's a syncretism of ideologies. And so I thought, wow, that's pretty... well, it's funny how it just happened all at the same time. The whole thing was we look back on it now, Dave, and I go, well, that is just amazing. Like it's like a bookend of Baby Grande and the church and everything. And now back at the other end, it's like the bookends of the things. And and I'm so glad that you appreciate how the music's very consistent and mature, but
well, there's a flow to it, isn't there? Yeah.
And it is very Pink Floyd-y, but Pink Floyd aren't Pink Floyd now. So,
correct.
Yeah, Floyd ain't Floyd.
No,
Floyd,
that's right.
Now, the album starts off with a song titled Sirens, which to me sounds like a song of hope. What can you tell us about that one?
Well, that's the thing. Every song, if we're going to, I'd really enjoy talking about the lyrics of these songs because the music is, speaks for itself. But lyrically, as I mentioned before in part one, I like to have parallels, and it's kind of fun. It also keeps it kind of secure. If you have parallels, they tend to kind of like reassure each other. So Sirens is about those mythological women, beautiful women who sing from the island, and Ulysses knew about them and had himself tied to the mast of his ship on the way back from the Troy battle and on his Odyssey. And the voices are so beautiful that sailors would jump overboard and swim to the islands, and then these sirens would turn into monsters who would eat them. But so I always loved Greek mythology as my favourite practical approach to philosophy of life. And so the sirens are there, and we were in search of a sound, and sometimes could be destructive. Like Dave and I both had probably parents who said, don't waste your time on music, do something, productive or, more money oriented or something like that. And so that was the danger of we had government jobs and we both quit them, and and they would have been very lucrative. So Sirens have that foreboding that, in search of our musical journey or whatever, on the journey that we could end up in destruction. And so that's probably where you get that sense of hope that song, because that wasn't the first song, that was kind of probably the second song. And so the higher than the sirens calling, we're bound, there's no chance to resist. I love the sound, and the other thing, it's just that's exactly what it's about. It's pretty, as I said, these songs are all about me trying to voice Dave's condition. I also realised it was my own, because in finding each other, it probably gave me some faith and restored me after the leaving of the church, which must have had some underlying emotional issues for me, although I usually don't do anything self-destructive. And,
I really like the line, there was darkness, there was doubt, wondering when those wings would ever sprout.
Yes, well, this is the thing. I'm not just writing for us. It ended up being for both of us, but it's also for anybody else who must have that feeling that why do you persist at something that everyone else is telling you not to do? And this is there's so many documentaries about people's life stories now and the adversities of that they had to overcome of doubt and people telling them no or interfering with them or dragging them back. And it seems to be something to do with courage. I mentioned that before in songwriting. I always look for courage, but in existence, that courage. And that's exactly, it's supposed to inspire people to know instinctively. A lot of people give up music probably because they don't instinctively think that they have got the talent for it. But if you've really got the talent for it, I don't think you can stop, whether you're successful or not. And we're just really probably glad that for our own sake of this music, if it reaches lots of other people, it's going to be beautiful music, but also some reassuring messages for other people, I think, which I couldn't be happier about, which is something that wasn't in the church's music particularly. I don't think so. They were always laments.
That's a conversation I've had many times with people over the years about that whole thing about people leaving music because they didn't find success and people not able to leave music because it's in their blood, as they say. It's a big divide, isn't it? And
I also teach a lot of people, and if there's singers, I tell the parents of kids and younger students and older people as well, if you're a singer, you've got to sing because there's something, you get sick, physically sick if you're a musical person. And for kids and that, they're usually more sensitive to things around them. And the schools let you teach the kids and take them out of class because they know that they learn faster and they seem to be more confident students. And it's a lot to do with identity, apart from the mechanical thing that stimulates the brain. The identity that they have of themselves, and they think, I am different than other people. They don't play music. I play music. I must be different. I'm not good at sports and footy, and everyone celebrates that around the world, the sports and those physical achievements. And music people and artistic people, they know they're different, and other people kind of think they're weird. I think they're more celebrated now. People kind of accept musicians more, than they ever did too. They kind of go, oh yeah, they're an artist. That's why they're different. And instead of what's the word? I can't think of the long word for isolating them what's the word for that? Come on. Bruce, you're good with language.
What's the language we're talking
about? Well, anyway, it's when people feel like outsiders,
yes.
and made to feel like outsiders. I don't think musicians and artists feel that anymore because of a lot of those documentaries, like Van Gogh and all these great artists. Van Gogh never sold a painting in his whole life except to his brother. And maybe one female Belgium artist, depending on which documentary you read. But
exactly.
Yeah.
Track 2, I Live. Now, I'll take a stab, and I'm probably wrong, but is that song about you and Dave or not?
No. Yes.
It is.
Yes, it is, but not originally. As
Right.
I say, I like to run parallels for just that's the fun I enjoy having rather than specifically. He used a nylon string guitar, and I said, that sounds really good. And he said, yeah, I found it in the dustbin at where he does guitar setups for people in Sydney.
Mm-hmm.
And he sort of found it in the shop as a student's guitar by a famous Australian brand called Maton. So I just glued it back together. And I said, that's incredible. So the song the song is an ode to the guitar. And he juxtaposed it with a huge guitar solo, which is probably his best example of his guitar solos. And he said, people don't want to hear guitar solos anymore. And I said, yeah, that was when in the 80s, but now there's no one who can really play guitar solos, so you just have to do it. And he plays 3 guitar solos consecutive at the end of the song, and it's a nylon string guitar song, and yet he's playing these Ritchie Blackmore style impassioned electric guitar Strat bending whammy bar stuff, and in 3 different moods for the 3 different sections of the song at the end of the song. And it says, I'll set fire to fingers until they ache, because that's what happens when you learn guitar. They always complain about how their fingers hurt.
Yes.
And then says, I'll sit before them like the songs they will make. So it's a personification of the guitar.
Yes.
and their voice. And of course, I live, you saved me when left forlorn and down resurrected now. So that's kind of me talking to Dave and giving him the lyrics, and I'm sure he'd probably feel maybe the same for me, that in this achievement but it's also about the guitar and about us both.
His vocals sound a bit Roger Waters-ish. And
he's an Anglophile.
Which is a good thing, but that song is a bit Floydish, So
I'm not ashamed if you say all of this sounds like Floyd, because like Pink Floyd and the Beatles, every single song was different.
Yeah,
the Floyd had a sound, but every one of their songs is kind of different. They kind of lost their way in the end and got miserable. As we spoke about miserable geniuses before, didn't we? Like Roger Waters.
Yes,
it's quite miserable. They indulge themselves too much, or or they might not. But thanks for that. Yeah, I don't have. Pink Floyd was some of the greatest musicians, songwriters. Like I mentioned before, that Deep Purple had the best musicians, Ritchie Blackmore and John Lord, but their songs were a bit naive, weren't they? Whereas Pink Floyd were a mature band, and a lot of prog rock bands were too technical or something like that, and or pompous, and of course Pink Floyd became kind of pompous too. But so I don't take any offence being compared to Pink Floyd at all. That the big John Lennon and Pink Floyd are my template of
as long as you're referring
my
to
yardsticks.
the early Pink Floyd.
Well, interestingly, I'm going to digress for a second, but I was driving home from the station the other day, and after my program, Steve had programmed music on, and I'm listening to this song, and I'm going, it sounds like Tame Impala. Actually, no, it sounds like Pink Floyd. What is this track? And turned out I pulled over and I Shazammed it, and it was If by Pink Floyd from Adam Hart Mother.
That's right.
Which I've got the album, but I must have, I've played the album once a very, very long time ago, and I was blown away by how good it sounded.
Oh, yeah.
And current too.
Good album, that
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, they definitely were eclectic and amazing. Yeah.
I set fire to fingers until they ache. I sit before them like the songs they will make. A reason to exist is giving music birth in some holiday, maybe sad or have mirth. face our fates. I live to sail away, to set you down someplace. I live, you save me. When left forlorn and down, resurrected now. I live, you save me. When left forlorn and down, I'm resurrected now.
Now, track 3.
Interestingly, Pink Floyd lost their lead singer in Syd Barrett,
Yes.
and then became like an instrumental kind of band with not really pop. Well, they weren't a pop band, whereas they were kind of a psychedelic pop band, as
yes.
Pink Floyd originally, and then they started becoming a bit more progressive. But obviously, they were one of the most biggest bands in the world without their lead singer.
I know.
So there's
incredible.
still hope for syncretism, isn't there?
Absolutely. Indeed. I agree. Flood or Fire is one of my favourites from the album, and
Yeah.
I can hear Bowie in there somewhere, but that's just me.
No, definitely Dave always had this Bowie-ish thing about him, like it was just innate for him to be like that. And he's an Anglophile, so, Bowie was who they say saved the 70s. But David Bowie, the prog rock and the heavy blues bands and the pop, it had all lost its way. And then David Bowie came in with Mark Bolan and Lou Reed. He produced, and Iggy Pop. He produced Iggy Pop later
That's
on
right,
too. And Glam Rock. He was a huge influence. He's obviously a John Lennon acolyte as well, because his musicianship is as clever as that, and songwriting. And so, yeah, I'm not going to take any offence to having a comparison to David Bowie.
So, what is Flood or Fire all about?
Well, the two elements here, it's like hell and high water, I suppose. I just realised this morning, thinking about whether I might have tried to rewrite Flood or Fire in those metaphors. But it was about relationships that falling apart, and also the world's environment. So, and written from the point of a responsible adult, say, or a responsible member of a relationship. It could be kids, adults, parents in a relationship. That pre-chorus goes, never to have to say, I let you down, I'm on a job, I want you around. It's like saying you want the environment, or you want that person, you want to have a good relationship with that person. There's always a compassionate thing. I always give people the choice if they want you around, and because I would, if I've invested time in people, I've always thought that there's something valuable there that I don't want to lose. But and same, so yeah, it's our regret will be to argue. Our regret won't be nostalgic. It's like, why are we fighting?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I do like the last bit, which says, now we are in this fog of where will the shore be?
Yes.
Because that's like the metaphor and the reality. So I kind of like the idea. I'm using metaphor, but it's actually reality as well, but without being too earnestly a greenie, although I am. Not an earnest greenie, but definitely you can't not be in another way. So of where the shore, as the waters rise, must fight the flood before me. I mean, you've got flood of tears, all those metaphors. I know all those old metaphors. They're triggers that people reuse, and it's like perfume. It smells different on different people. So I'm not afraid of using the old metaphors, and they do connect. And I'm having kind of fun with them, playing the whole album lyrically. I'm really, really glad about it, because I'm having fun with words and lyrically. It's lyrical art, if you like. You know? Yeah, that's how I'm see it. And if that's what poetry is, but you can't have poetry and music. It's too rich, but I think it is.
I agree.
regrets for our own torture. On our way, an old story keeps returning about life without respecting everything burning. Not to have to say I let you down. I'm on the job. I want you around. Our regret will be to argue. Our regret won't be nostalgic. Now's the time, if not together, our world to be tragic. Now we are in this far of where will the shore be? As the waters rise, must fight the flood before me. Not to have to say I let you down. I'm on the job. I want you around. Our regret will be to argue. Our regret won't be nostalgic. Now's the time, if not together, our world to be tragic. Our regret will be to argue. Our regret won't be nostalgic. Now's the time, if not together, our world to be tragic. Our regret will be to argue. Our regret won't be nostalgic. Now's the time, if not together, our world to be tragic. Like fire on fire, like the fire on the fire.
Now, you touched on this earlier, their song, obviously about moving on from the church, correct?
Oh, well, again, it's about a reflection of a lot of things. As you get older, this is another thing. I'm not trying to write songs like I'm a teenager, like Mick Jagger seems to be doing these days. He was one of my favourite lyricists in the trilogy era with, but even earlier, I always loved his storytelling and his mimicking. He had a great sense of humour when he, like faraway eyes.
Yeah, I was
and,
just thinking exactly that. Yeah.
He's one of the greatest lyricists ever, and very entertaining. And I don't know why what he's writing recently. He's gotten a little bit more, what is it, socio-political or something like that. But their song is about leaving. It's a leaving song and trying to be compassionate, but it's about reflecting on. Oh, that's what I mean. The thread was as you get older, and Bob Dylan's done a pretty great new album, I think, as a mature, or even I don't know what you'd call him, an elderly musician, certainly very mature musician. And I always wanted to write music that I feel not embarrassed about listening to when I was the age I am now, actually. And I'm over 60 now, so I'm thinking, I can't pretend, a lot of things. I think that I should be able to write music for people of my age, and also younger people can look to what it's like to be old, because I thought the legacy of growing older as a musician was very poor. What happened to the Rolling Stones and Pink Floyd, and that what had made them great, they were diluting it by, they didn't need the money. Why make these songs unless, they could just go and play music together? Why do they need to go and foist it upon us, and destroy the legacy of the greatness of the era that was 60s and 70s, the golden era of music with those bands, those musicians. So, their song is a compassionate view of my life experience of being, relationships that come and go, and the fact that I felt that I'd tried to do the best I could, and wasn't just egotistically annoyed that I didn't get my way. And we won't mention any names here.
Now, can I just say also what's fantastic about this digital release is the fact that it comes with a PDF file where you can actually...
Very nice.
It's very nicely put together. Now, the artwork, drawings, paintings, watercolours, etc., is that all Dave that's done that? Yeah, amazing work.
He just did them on the spot, and just for the hell of it. So we'd have something there, but I didn't realise he had that talent either. And I've been just looking at it again today to review for this interview, and the graphic design is by Ian Martin, who's done a lot of work for me or with me in my solo covers, and he also is a very talented musician and a left-handed guitarist in the same way that Dave's left-handed. I'm very aware of left-handed people. The only one of the Beatles who wasn't left-handed was John Lennon, because Ringo was a left-handed drummer. He used to lead all these drum fills with his left hand, and no one could play like that. Yep. And George Harrison was a left-handed who played right-handed.
That's right.
Like a lot of guitarists, you might not be aware of, like Waddy Wattell from who produced Starfish album for the Church and works with Stevie Nicks as her solo album band guitarist, who also worked in the Expensive Winos with Keith Richards, and actually left our Starfish sessions for 2 weeks to record with Keith Richards in Toronto for 2 weeks, and he said to us, if it was you, you'd do the same thing, I'm not bailing, I'll be back,
Can't blame him on that one,
so he was very, very close to Keith Richards, and he was a left-handed guitarist who played right-handed as well. Yes. So I've always been aware of left-handed people, so they usually tend to be very talented.
Indeed. It's ironic you say that, because I started off as a left-hander myself, but being a drummer up front, and every time I went to play the drums, someone would say, hey, jump on and play. They were always set up right-handed. And it was too much of a muck around to reset it. So I was like, I just have to learn to do it right-handed, but that's just to conform.
But Ringo, to your point, Peter, before, I saw on YouTube, it's fantastic if you see Dave Stewart from Eurythmics is interviewing Ringo Starr and starts to play the drum intro from Ticket to Ride and also come together. And Ringo,
you can't play it as a right-handed drummer.
He cannot play it. No. And he's
incredible. With your left hand, you have to lead with your left hand to do that beginning of come together. And the other drummers are the drummer from the Beach Boys. He was a left-handed hi-hat player, and the drummer from the Angels, Buzz Bistrop, he's a left-handed hi-hat player as well. They're left-handed players who obviously just play with a right-hand kick.
Fascinating.
It is. I think that there's something creative in their mindset. They also don't live very long.
Don't tell me that.
Actually, I know that they don't like to hear that either. But it's because actually this is the other. From part one, I mentioned this. The two young 18-year-olds who were part of my story there. The other thing was they were both left-handed drummer guitarists who played right-handed as well.
Oh, wow.
I'd forgotten to mention that. Isn't that bizarre?
some troubles, and now I'm moving on. There were some people that did me wrong. I tried to love them all, but they would not change. There was some good in there until it was too strange. I gave all that I could take. Now I've got it all. After all, the years have been filled with worlds that have failed, with loves that were made, and those that have paled. Often not what I had willed, but my love was never afraid. It hurts sometimes without regret, but this is all of mine. Do not forget. I had some troubles. Now I'm moving on. There were some people that did me wrong. There was some good in there until it was too strange. I gave all that I could take. Now I've got it all. After all, I gave all that I could take. Now I've got it all. After all.
Now, track 5, First Nation. I wrote a note here last night, and I think that it's got an Icehouse type vibe. So don't know.
Ultra Bruce. No, I really like Ivor Davies, and Icehouse inspired me to form the band The Church, because I thought if people in Australia like this kind of heady, immersive music, then there's a chance that they'll like what I would do.
Good
So
luck.
which one was the Icehousey song?
First Nation.
Yes. Well, that's probably because it's got that. Well, it actually was a sequencer kind of song. It started out. We didn't write a song about First Nation people of Australia deliberately. It was actually sounded more like a Madonna song.
Interesting.
Because it sounded like Ray of Light. Did it have a sequencer?
Yep. I know the song.
And with a bit of a U2 guitar bit in it, I thought, this is an interesting thing. And I don't know where I came upon it, but I've been obsessed by Aboriginal culture because it's the only society that's ever been successful and peaceful, and
Yes.
and they had trading. It's a nation, and they call each of their tribes nations anyway. But the whole country of nations, I call the First Nation because that seems to be the oldest history, and yet, interestingly, the most successful one because they hardly ever had any fights. And what I think it was because, unlike any other society, they don't believe in ownership.
Yes.
They were looking after the land, and they had a territory, but they didn't own it. They were looking after it for the gods or whatever, pagan, whatever. I don't know if they even called it gods. They don't have a concept of God as a monothesis, a single God or whatever like that. They just have an idea, which I always had that feeling too, that there might be a greater power or something. It's just natural. There's a part of our brain devoted to it called, the religiosity is the section of the brain that supposedly we have that animals don't have. So I watched all that series on SBS called First Australians.
Yes.
Yep.
And I was just astounded at the patience that they have. And I know that, interestingly, Midnight Oil's just released a song called First Nation in the last weeks, and their album's number one. And I thought, well, this is an interesting comparison to see how they've always championed Aboriginal culture as well. And I thought, and I love them for that. They're the real true punk band, I think, and musically great as well. And I think this sounds pretty good, the new record too. But they if I could criticise them anyway, they're a bit. There's an anger. They kind of like trying to voice Aboriginal anger, and I don't feel Aborigines are frustrated, but I don't see them as angry. And if you watch the First Australian series, I think there might be 8 episodes from different states of Australia, particularly focusing on it. It's unbelievable the injustices and the cruelty that they've endured, and they just don't seem to be aggressive, angry like they were defending themselves. They were painted as being savages and attacking the whites and that, but they didn't seem to do it in anger, and they weren't being protective of the land because they thought, well, we should share it, and that's always been one of their greatest exponents of Aboriginal culture to the Australians. He was a top Aussie rules football player. He became one of the most famous Australians, and he says, we want to walk with you, we don't want you to, we want to walk together, because they're just a sharing people. That's their nature. That's their whole culture. They don't own things. And there's no other culture in the world that has that. So I thought that must be why they're so different and why they were so successful. And I thought in the end, after the dust settles of all humanity's wars and, injustices, and that they'll kind of go, well, what do we do? And I often describe this as like when the trains in Sydney didn't work. They brought a guy from England and he said, okay, when did the trains run on time? He said, by 1975. Okay, we're going to start with that timetable and then we're going to build on that timetable. And that's how they got them to run. And I thought that'll be the same thing for humanity. They'll say, when did it ever work? If it didn't work anyway, we might as well give up. But no, it did work once upon a time. The Australian Aborigines had trade routes across 3,000 miles of the landscape that they knew their way through poems. They didn't have a written language because they had such phenomenal memories that they could remember, like a Shakespearean-length book or play of poem or song lines, as they call them, to know at every area, at every season, where to find water and food for them to travel, across the landscape. So I'm still, getting more and more information about that because I find it just totally captivating.
Seized and struck down, done without a frown. Our idea of life so foreign.
It's also interesting that we're recording this at the beginning of NAIDOC week, so that's very synchronistic. Doc week this week.
It's very significant. I don't know if you believe in astrological kind of, things, divergences, confluences and things, but, the American election, obviously, with having a centrist, oldest president ever, who's seen everything that anyone could probably ever have, who's still alive, is in a position to bring faith, because the whole world has been on tenterhooks because of this, the feeling of the danger or premonitions of something terrible spiritually, morally in the world. If we didn't get past this year of the coronavirus, only intensified those feelings of humanity and what do you respect, what do you value, and it's been a really huge year this year, and the unprecedented and all the rest of it. But NAIDOC week is I've always been aware of that celebration as well. I always watch their the Deadlies as well. They have like a music, not competition, because I don't think they have it. They'd have a music celebration every year, like our arias. And I always like, watching that and astounded. There's been some massive successes. There's a really cool Aboriginal rapper. I think he was on that national television broadcast to raise money for the bushfires. He was on stage with, it wasn't Midnight Oil, he was on stage with John Farnham's band or something like that, wasn't he?
Something like that, I don't quite remember.
And there's another a kid rapper that's like hugely popular overseas, funny enough, like from Redfern, Sydney.
That's right. Yes, I saw him just recently. Yeah, very good.
Boy at something, isn't it? I mean, I'd remember. I'm never good at remembering names.
Yeah, no, I'm not good at names either.
But certainly, I think that generation, the new generation, they kind of have. I don't know. They don't. I think they've actually kind of moved on. That's the one thing that we were worried that everyone would be burdened with all of our feelings of injustices and fights, and that I think they have a pride. A lot of kids are going back to country, Aboriginal kids, and learning, because especially with COVID, there's no, people say lockdown, worried about food and sustainability and that. The Aborigines just went bush.
That's right.
They couldn't. In fact, this First Nation song, I rang up the local Gubbi Gubbi is the tribe from, or the nation that's from the Sunshine Coast, which actually stretches from the New South Wales coast all the way up to Bundaberg. That's how big their land area is on the coast, the Gubbi Gubbi. And he said, I said, I'd like to have a didgeridoo player play on my song First Nation. And I said, I know they don't like cultural appropriation and all the rest of it, and they're very, very careful about doing anything with anyone,
Yep.
And so I said I sent him the song. He really liked it, and he said, here's my documentary videographer. Go and ask him. And he wanted to go to one of the other leaders who's in the arts dance culture up here, and they never came. Well, actually, I wanted them to give me some photos or something that they approved for the song, rather than pinching anything or putting on. And that never. And I was going to have a bit of a video of Aborigine children actually dancing, because I thought that is as I mentioned before, I think the new generation of Aborigines are going to have like a different perspective, maybe. I could feel that, it's a renewal or something like that, and I didn't want to go into the old things. So, but they said, there's no way I can get a didgeridoo player because they've all gone country. And so I had to emulate a didgeridoo for the song, which I think was great in the end, because it was like a space didgeridoo, and I used an e-bow, which is the electronic violin bow.
Oh, yes.
And which I also feature in one of the instrumental on this album, with some a vocalizing effect that I found in a pedal, which sounds like chanting monks. I might have mentioned that in part one too.
You did, actually, yeah.
So I've got this chanting monks and the electronic violin bow just droning through the whole song, and I was really glad that I could. That's like a syncretism again, that evolving an idiom. I think I've respectfully evolved their didgeridoo aspect. And it's part of my canon of sound as well, or my palette, is droning. The church music is a lot about droning notes. We did a lot of droning high notes. So I think that it's kind of like an overlap there. I don't think I'm appropriating their thing unnecessarily. I'm just reaffirming, my maybe they had an influence on me. Mm-hmm.
I know when I've recorded dig players before, they've always said that as long as the music's treated with respect, they're really cool about it. Like, the respect seems to be the big thing for them. As long as it's done with respect, they're fine.
But everyone's got a different opinion, the problem. I'm very, very wary of any polluting that will happen of offence that this record or anything that I do might garner. I just don't want to deal with naysayers or negativity on any level. So I'd rather just be independent of it. And because, as I mentioned in part one again, that there's Aborigine people who betrayed their own culture, who the trackers were hired by the white people to go and track down Aboriginal activists who would never have been found if it wasn't for their own people tracking them down. So I don't trust anybody or any thing really. I try to be as independent as possible, and First Nation is a huge compliment. That the reason I did it is because I don't think anyone else has really stipulated the things, because I tell people all around the world about Aborigines, and so there's some spoken passages in it which I thought might sound too earnest, and that we tried to put it over the top of the music and that, and we thought, no, we need to present it for what it is. It just seemed to fit better. There was a lot of rearrangement and stuff. And so, the way I talked about, instead of being angry, the way I represented the Aboriginal voices in them, and saying, and it's an apology from on behalf of non-Aboriginal people, I think, to them. And it says, how can it take much longer to realise this culture is stronger, with no need for ownership from the cup of love they sip, with hundreds of languages they've been trading over the ages, and can show the path as sages before there's nothing left to acquit, meaning, nothing left to split up or share or say what we did with what we had, Acquit's a bit of a funny word there, but I used it anyway.
Now, track 6, Good Friend. What can you tell us about that one?
Again, the parallels are reacquainting with Dave musically, because I always know he was a good friend, and we always, every year, I'd call him at least once, and we have a great, enjoyed each other's company on the phone, humorous and discussing things. So, but it was also about the pain, the parallel of the pain of anything, whether it's the relationships, again, and it's trying to give people faith again, and ourselves. It's a reflection on us, and because you do suffer and doubt, and I think Dave was suffering for the feeling that he had something really great to offer, because he wouldn't have been wanting to do anything for attention. It's very hard to get him to talk about himself at all, and so again, it's about him and our relationship, and also my, loss of friends when I left the church. I didn't care to really communicate anymore, so I'd lost some friends, and if they were friends anyway, and that's also what is a friend, the definition of a friend. And then, as every song should have like a sense of hope, there it is with this above the forest where it's clear, where sense is in everything so sheer, high sanctified and settled down, and how it is with a good friend. Try instead of, using the metaphor, everyone knows what could come, especially this COVID time. This was all done before COVID, really, or just as it was coming upon, the intensity of what people want to be with other people, and not just talk to them. And yet that really helped, having the capacity to talk. And we all had Skype, and then we thought, but when you see people, you're not supposed to touch them. You can't help yourself. You just you just go grab them and hug them, and it's like it's bizarre, hasn't it? Been an incredible
very, very
time.
weird.
It is weird. I caught up with my parents last week for the first time in many weeks, of course, like a lot of people. And we met at a public place because we thought, we'll do the right thing and everything. And there we are with our masks and everything. We're walking towards each other. Lots of people all around us. And my dad, who's in his 80s, just couldn't help himself. He just launched into our arms and hugged us all. And I whispered in his ear, Dad, I don't think we should be doing this in public. And he goes, who gives us stuff? He just needed some contact,
But sometimes that's another thing in this time. Everyone's wondering what risk assessment is a big thing for anything in any industry or any business or relationship. And the risk, like sometimes you need to be, your happiness is more important for your health than anything. And they say people don't get sick if they're happy.
Interesting.
Which is there's a biggie. Come on.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say that the times, touch wood, I haven't been ill for quite a while, but the times where I've been working like a maniac, stress levels incredibly high is when I've been ill. So, yeah.
But did you recover very quickly after you did some good work?
Yes.
Yeah, well, that's it. This is the same thing with syncretism for me. It's been very fulfilling, and having work is a really important thing for people to do. Having a purpose, I think a lot of people who work in finance and gambling and that don't really. They know then they're doing something useless and bad for society.
Correct.
That's where Lucifer, that song Lucifer, we'll get to later, is about that. They know intrinsically they're doing something that's useless and bad for them. Or they don't probably realise how bad it is for them spiritually. And anybody who just gets up and does a job, that's one of the reasons we mentioned probably Japan too in the last part. The reason that society works so much is to have such a strong work ethic, maybe to maybe too much, but they do a job and they feel that job is for the people, for each other, and that makes them fulfilled. But you notice yourself, if you do something like even washing the dishes or cleaning the house, if there's some people complain about stuff, and then there's other people who go, they feel self-respecting to not live in crap, and they feel worthwhile that they've done something purposeful there and sharing the house with other people, but even just for themselves, like doing a useful job. Just once, Japan, these people retire from big businesses and they just sweep the streets because they just want to feel purposeful.
That's really interesting. I don't cut the lawn now. Someone comes in because it's like
that's not a metaphor, is it?
We live on a mountain basically. It's a 45-degree angle, and there's danger money involved. So anyway, but when
just buy the Flymo to the clothesline and do it by itself.
and it's a massive block. In fact, the guy, his name's Mike, lovely guy, he's a fireman, and he basically does the whole street. So basically, no one cuts their lawn, and this guy comes with his whippersnipper. Anyway, I digress. In other properties that we've lived in where I have mowed the grass, after I'd done it, I would then cut the edges and I would sweep the gutter, and then I'd sit back and look at it and I go, how good does that look? And it's the same with what you were saying about doing the housework. Like I actually love looking at the carpet upstairs after it's been vacuumed. It looks, I go, wow, that looks fantastic. Yeah,
it is. It's like it's restoring a work of art or something.
Yeah.
And there's all people who made those carpets. I was in India and people make the carpets. You start looking at the detail of that people, everything that you see is people were involved in it quite often, planting your gardens and that. You could get a goat, by the way. You could do a good job in the yard there.
Yes, we could. Yes.
Good call.
And the other thing, sorry for interrupting here, but you made a point about enjoying your work and having purpose, etc. And I saw a band called The Church, and the lead singer said, He said something about, oh God, I'd hate to work in a bank, right? And guess what I was doing at the time? I was working in a bank, and I was.
Now, what's the good side of working in a bank? At least you have a finite thing. If you've done a good job, you know that you didn't lose any money.
Exactly. But do you? Well, when I was a teller, I used to enjoy the fact that they used to call it you'd slicker, meaning that you had the correct amount of money in your drawers. Anyway, I got to the stage where I went to work each day, and I felt like I may as well have just ripped up everything I've just done and put it in the rubbish bin, because I had absolutely no joy out of doing the work at all, and I ended up changing career. But it's very true, so I can relate to that.
A final comment on that is that my partner's family in North America, 2 sisters and brother, have all worked in banks their whole career. They're all suffering of cancer at the moment.
Yeah, there you go.
Oh, so, well, that girl Maria Gavorko I mentioned in part 1, who was my muse and also wrote the song The Destroyer from the Iridescent EP together. She was a teller 1, which means they're the top. One. Yeah, wow. Teller 1. So she was in banking, and I do all the royalties for the band. We've got such a massive catalogue. No one else knows all of the songs, and we get 17,000 entries of each song. I have to go and learn how to use Excel sheets to kind of be able to simplify adding these things. And sometimes it's not, the songs are on different versions of different entities as well. So I'm kind of the only one who can do it. So, and I actually get a satisfaction out of getting that. It's frustrating though, because accountants have to go and cross-check all of their calculations to be sure they haven't made a mistake. Subtotal and add them and compare them. That. So I've had to work out a system that. So I feel a bit of pride in that. Like,
good.
Just bookkeeping is not just a robotic thing, because you can't. Well, I can't get a software program to do it for me yet, unless I program that, and that'll take just as long as doing the work.
Yeah, that's right.
Exactly.
I sympathize with hurting hearts, how it aches without a drop. Sitting waiting for another train to come, wondering if it missed a stop. Above the forest where it's clear, where senses in everything so sheer, high sanctified and settled them, and how it is with a good
Now, track number 7 is an instrumental.
Yes.
Called Journey.
And this is the one melody that, all the melodies of the rest of the album with Dave, I might have prompted some things, but they were his. But this is my melody, the melody that is, and it's a one-note melody. And I mentioned this, I'm not sure, I think I mentioned this in part 1, about the quantum level of music. When notes change pitch, they become infinite. And this is one note. I started with one note with this electronic violin bow and a slide, and with Spirit March on the part 1, I mentioned that I was using a slide, but this time it's just one note, and I just on one string, and I just tracked that slide up and down the one string with the violin note for the whole of the song, even though there's a dropout. I did it all in one take, and it's pretty much one note technically, because even though that note changes pitches, it doesn't change to another note unless it's passing through that note by being a part of a slide. So this is my quantum thing, and I'm going to get a friend of mine to do a cosmic kind of video, hopefully, to exemplify this in a visual, spacey cosmic. So if anyone's listening to it now before that video, just imagine a comet, that it's like a comet, and it's called Journeyer.
Yes.
Because it feels like that note is like a comet in space,
Yeah, I can relate to that. Yeah, great track.
And that's done with the big string thing. I've got these orchestral effects, and so it's the slide with the orchestral strings, which have like a massive tail, like a comet tail of sound instead of water vapor, which a comet is. And also the comet, people think the comet tail is behind the comet, but it's not. It's actually towards the sun, because it's the sun evaporating the water molecules that the asteroid is actually made of. Or the comet, not asteroid. The comets are water drops in space.
That's right, yeah.
But where did they come from?
Now, what's interesting about the album...
Aren't you going to ask me my theory? I reckon it comes from the Pacific Ocean. Okay, let's not go there. That's going to be our science program, okay?
Yeah.
Indeed. That can be part 6. What I like about the album... Well, how do I get this out? I've got favourite tracks, and then I listen to the album again, and then I go, oh... Actually, this is my new favourite, and it's really interesting because it keeps changing. It's like bingo. I just keep having different favourite tracks. So it's not
That's
to say
fantastic, because different moods. Like I've liked Hendrix, and every 10 years I'll go. I've found I don't think I like him now, and then I come back and say, how did I not like him? But time. This is great that all the songs seem to fit this time period, because sometimes things you wait and then you pick up on it years later. I usually give myself a month. I listen to a new record, and if I don't like it, I won't listen to it again. If I'm not sure, I'll wait a month and play it again, and somehow it's percolated in the back of my mind to know whether I really like it or not.
yes.
Yeah, I do something similar. Yeah, I relate. Yeah.
Yep, same thing happens to me. I'll listen to an album, and it might be The Byrds, for example, and then I'll go back and listen to another album, and then Sarah's, my wife, in the car, puts it on, and she goes, oh, God, he's going through his Byrds period again. or I'm going through my Pink Floyd period, or, it's everything's Beatles, and I won't play anything else. And so that's how I end up that's how my musical brain works.
I bet she loves you for your passion, and I'm sure she gets something out of it anyway.
She's just pleased I'm out of the house.
Oh.
But she does listen in, Peter, which I'm quite surprised with. So
I think she's very fortunate to have a good DJ like you.
There you go. those tracks that I'm loving is her hymn.
Mm-hmm.
And very moody indeed.
That's obviously a joke, isn't it? The hymn, but even if you didn't see the spelling of the hymn being
Exactly.
HYMN.
Yeah.
And the other
Indeed.
thing is, God is a woman. As in, Helen Reddy.
Yes, she said that. Yes.
Yeah. And so I like playing. That's in the title. I got a bit of a fun play on things there.
Well, I like in the lyrics here where you've actually got her, and then it says she says there must be love and there must be a marriage, and then it goes to him, desire in the design, can it be disparaged? And then back to her, says mixed up and compromised, can't see a flame that's in the eyes, and then goes back to him, not to stray, but should one shy with an heavenly alibi.
Yeah, now that's dangerous. Like, I really wondered if I'm going to get in strife for that one, but I thought, I just got to go and put this out there because everyone's, political correctness is the big question today, and political correctness, by true definition, was supposed to, politics is like a compromise, isn't it? Diplomacy and a compromise. That's what I believe politics is, and so political correctness, I could see how it's supposed to be for the betterment of people to have this political correctness, but it has been misused by people, and interpretations. Language is very interpretable, and so I thought I might get in a bit of danger there. And we talked. You didn't get any hate mail for our part one thing where I mentioned some of my attitudes to libertarianism and things like that.
I think
there's been no hate mail.
Actually, yeah.
Is it libertarianism or libertinism? I think it meant libertinism, not libertarianism, because everyone likes libertarianism, but libertinism, like anarchy, has depending on which dictionary you go, anarchy was like a revolt against the powers because they were wrong, but the powers didn't like that, so they made it out to be a violent revolt against the powers to try and make anarchy a negative, give it a negative
Connotation,
connotation. Whereas, and as a songwriter, we putting this stuff down in print. It's not like you say, I said that at the moment, I didn't really mean it. I'm sticking it out there. I'm supposed to deliver this forever. And I have to say, everything that I've ever written, I think about it, mull it over, because I'm, having fun with it at the same time, and haven't got an agenda to just express. I stand by everything that I've ever written, and I had to think, well, this is putting it out there very literally, isn't it? But then again, I'm saying it could be a third person. It's about another person, and but it could be about me and my opinion. So I celebrate it, in lyric in that.
Yeah.
And design. So what desire in the design? What do you think I meant by that?
Design. I can't answer that question off the top of my head.
Him, it's a male thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
So the design, and we always have been men are from Mars, women are from Venus. That differentiate, and then at the same time we're saying in this era of political correctness today, inequality, men and women are the same, but they're not, and there's the balance between them. There's some, and I don't say they're separate entities. I have this whole thing, and as I mentioned before, I'm a centrist in the sense that. I'm the devil's advocate. People always call me wishy-washy, and I say no, but you have to consider the opposite, don't you? If you're afraid of considering the opposite, then how good is your argument? Because you haven't thought about it. Well, it's my duty to give you the opposite argument, whether I believe in it or not. And I'm totally like that. I'm the devil's advocate for everything, and saying that, I don't have any retreat from this, do it? She says there must be love and there must be a marriage. That is not a libertine might believe in love and a marriage. What is love? Is love, a devotion? Is it romantic love? Is it a respect? And marriage, is that a business relationship that all societies, tribal and modern societies, seem to have this idea of combining two people to bring up children or something like that. What other reason is there for marriage?
Yeah.
I know. And this is the thing I thought about with the marriage equality in Australia. As I said before, I I'm a Greens voter if I have to vote, and I don't necessarily support everything they do. And I was wondering when they got distracted with the marriage equality debate, when I think, hey, come on, we all need an environment. Isn't that the overriding thing? And then when they won the marriage debate, I said they've got civil unions, which means that as people, they as a partnership, marriage or whatever, they've got a partnership for civil union, all of the benefits and protections are afforded there. Why do they need to actually call it marriage? Especially when people complain, they said, they're defiling the idea of marriage. And someone else said, no, divorce has already done that. So, and then they say, well, like arranged marriages are more successful than romantic marriages in the world too. So, what are you talking about? Why do you have to have this, the union of marriage? And then when they passed the marriage debate and Australia voted for, same-sex marriage, I realised the importance was the idea that they were accepted, for their love.
Yeah.
By giving it a name, and that's what they wanted to. And I thought, what, that's why the Greens were right. And I'm glad I kept an open mind about it, that is probably the first for people to consider it each other. Then they might start considering the environment and animal farming and all the rest of it. So it was very, very important after all. So I might sound like I'm making a mockery of marriage, and then desiring the design, can it be disparaged? And that's about that theosophy, unconditional love aspect of, if you have desire, is that being unfaithful? If you're married and you have desire, and people flirt, and flirting makes people feel good, but they're intimidated by it if they're jealous people who are insecure or they think it might go too far. But that's a matter of respect. There's another thing, I don't know if, I think we might have mentioned this, the Aleister Crowley celebrated this expression, do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Again, which is, like self-determination, but the caveat was in the name of love, and respect. And what is that word love? It's like, if you can do whatever you like, if there's love. And if you have unconditional love, you can do whatever you like. And this is, being a 60s child, we had love the one you're with, which people thought that means, let's get it on with whoever you're with. But it's not. If you can't be with the one you love, you might as well love someone else and not just be lonely and hate the world because the one who you love doesn't love you. That's what I interpreted, but most people didn't. They just thought that was free love, an excuse for free love, and took advantage of it on a selfish level rather than a love level. So the desire and the design, that's what I mean. Can it be disparaged? If you believe in a power and a natural power, is desire a bad thing? And I don't think it is, and I think it's impossible to deny it. And and then there's mixed up and compromise. Can't see the flame that's in the eyes, and if someone's not loving you, then you can't make them love you, And so, what are you trying to force, with the bounds of marriage, for instance? And not to stray, but one shy with a heavenly alibi. So, if it is desire is in the design, and this is all unconditional love in a practical, thing for me to put it into a parable, if you like, kind of like a rhetorical questioning parable. So there you go.
Now,
something to chew on philosophically.
Indeed.
I like that a lot.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I expect the artisan of all that's broken now has projected there is another way out. Regards this is sinful, allows us how to see while we strive to be. Oh, is this in the plan? We'll accept the choice that's handed down. Or is it until you show us how? She says there must be love and there must be a marriage. Him, desire in the design. can it be disparaged? Mixed up and compromised, can't see a flame that's in the eyes. Him, not to stray, but should one shine with a heavenly alibi? Oh, is this the plan? We'll accept the choice, let's hand it down. Or is it until you show us how? I expect the artisan of all that's broken now has projected there is another way out. Regards this as sinful, allows us how to see while we strive to be. Oh, is this the plan? We'll accept the choice, let's hand it down. Or is it until you show us how? Oh, is this the plan? We'll accept the choice, let's hand it down. Or is it until you show us how? Him. Her. Him.
Now, track 9, Cuba.
Yes, I've been there.
So, what have you got to say about that particular song? It's the longest in terms of lyrics.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a lot
I
to
wrote
say in there.
that. I wrote it in Cuba,
Yeah.
and I wasn't that convinced that a dictator who limited opportunities in Cuba was the best thing. I knew that they were a fantastic culture, so to speak, but I wasn't sure. Fidel Castro, I kind of mocked it a bit and thought Fidel Castrati, because I thought he'd kind of like, cut the balls off, castrated the people in a way, and mostly because I knew that he had, when the Russians were supporting Cuba and America had invaded Cuba, that he encouraged the Russians to do a nuclear strike on America. And I thought, well, that's an emotional retaliation. So I knew a bit about that, the history, and I thought, well, he was an angry man and he was a leader, and I don't think that this is another thing with Biden being such a centrist, and he's the most respected person in, well, not, I don't know about most respected, his opinion by the left and the right government, parliament, Congress, whatever you want to call it in American government, or not government, parliament, I'd have to call it that. He knows everybody there, and he has their ear, and because he's seemingly probably the perfect person to heal the world, because he's a centrist. He's not right and not left. He's made mistakes, but he's a forgivable kind of guy. And so this is funny that this weekend that we're doing this interview as so pertinent to a lot of the themes that I think are in the record.
Yes. Yeah.
So Cuba is like a mixture of things, and horse and cart, Mercedes-Benz. They've got horse and carts, and they also have Mercedes-Benz taxis, which are not taxis, ambulances, the same as what the paramedics have in Australia and the rest of the world. They've got the best doctors in the whole world, and more doctors per head of population than any person in Cuba who has an injury on a farm or whatever. They get a Mercedes-Benz paramedic ambulance. comes and picks them up. They all feel equal and treated well. And there's some people complain that the kids haven't got Facebook and that, but you'll never, apart from Japan, I've never seen such a respectful, dignified society. Vanuatu is a tribal society. Cuba is kind of like a, socialist dictatorship, and Vietnam is like there's a lot of respect there for the people seem to have for each other and their society, and they're like a free enterprise socialism, which is a weird thing to conceive. And Japan obviously is the first world economy, the third biggest economy in the world. This is another thing in America I think is really funny, that the right wing are afraid of socialism, and yet the whole of California is a democratic state that Republicans are afraid to announce who they are in case their job prospects are limited, because people won't invite them into their businesses, because that can cause trouble, I suppose, for whatever reason, I won't say. But so they're, if socialism, if the Democrats are a socialist problem for America, how come California is the sixth biggest economy in the world, bigger than any other economy in America?
Indeed.
Now the other thing with this election, Florida has got a lot of Cuban expatriates. The salsa actually was invented by Cuban expatriates in New York. And they love music and dance. Of course, I'm going to love Cuba. They celebrate music, and so and they're just happy people and seeming respectful people. But it mentions it in this lyric in Cuba too. About they don't have gamblers and drugs, although there is a little bit. But Florida apparently voted Republicans because a whole lot of Cubans and Venezuelans voted against socialism, and they were afraid of socialism. And again, I thought that's really strange that they're not smart enough to realise that California is Democrat and there's no socialism there. So how do they get that idea that they're afraid that America would have the problems of a socialist dictatorship when you almost had a dictator there before? So and the other thing about Venezuela, they're the only country that traded with Cuba in fear of being treated as a terrorist, supporting a terrorist country like Cuba was on the terrorist list, by America. And so, Venezuela was the only country, and Holland, that traded with Cuba. So I think that was interesting too. Also, Venezuela's got the biggest oil reserves in the world.
Fascinating.
And it's obviously one of the poorest countries, and not that I want them to use those oil reserves either, but they haven't been able to. And obviously, there's been a mass exodus of people from Venezuela due to starvation, because America has crushed their economy as well. It's very complicated, this whole political thing. That's why I don't really like to have an opinion one way or another. I just like to point out the things that I've noticed, not have a judgment on them, But so I'm a greenie, and it comes down to the environment. I think you can't go wrong.
I don't know.
We all have to eat food.
I don't know if you noticed this while you were over there. I had a friend that spent some time in Cuba, and she was fascinated by the fact that after the Americans had put on sanctions and stopped oil and all sorts of imports into the country, that they had to reinvent themselves, and they started a lot of market gardens, and you see buses being pulled around by horses and things like that. And they ended up in a situation at least 10 years ago, when she was telling me this story, where they've actually found a form of happiness and peace beyond technology, because they've had to reinvent themselves in a lot of ways, where they rely on each other a lot more than what we do in other Western countries.
Yeah, but they don't farm as much as they could. They do suffer the same fate as most people in the world. They're kind of everyone tries to get out of doing hard work, arduous work like farming and that. So they do import a lot of food, but they could grow more food than they do. I was really surprised to hear that Holland is one of the biggest exporter of food in the world because they grow so much efficiently in greenhouses without pesticides because they don't have insects. And I was quite surprised that I heard that yesterday.
Yeah, no,
Holland's one of the biggest exporters of food in the world.
Yeah,
Wow.
I was there a couple of years ago, and I was amazed by how many greenhouses there were in Holland. Like just miles and miles of them there. It's huge. Yeah,
Multi-storied.
Yes, absolutely.
They kind of have them on a conveyor belt, up a vertical conveyor belt of, or not conveyor belt, but yeah, they're pretty efficient. They're quite industrious. The Dutch.
Yes, they are.
Have to be, wouldn't they? Oh, they were traders as well, you know.
That's
I also mentioned that was the banking system that underwrote the United States or the independence of America. The French wouldn't support them unless they had a bank. Just to I didn't realise money was that important. It's interesting, isn't it?
Indeed. Do you know the Federal Reserve in America is privately owned?
Yeah, all of them are. Bank of England. Of England's privately owned.
Yep.
I'm not sure about ours.
Yeah, Australian Federal Reserve is not government.
No, it's not.
No, they don't. They're supposed to capitulate to government things, and they do. They generally do, I think. Yeah. Anyway,
Now,
money.
In a rich man's world. There
Which
you go.
takes us on the track.
Oh, come on.
Which takes us on to.
I know. I like our bonus, but let's not go there.
Horse and cart, Mercedes-Benz. Music plays and never ends. Spirit in glass, as pure as the people. The square of art has no steeple. Freedom fight was fought for the right of free thought. Everywhere is ice cream. The smiling people beam. A simple love at home is best. This life is proof to stand that test. Billboards celebrate rebellions, successful fate. Gamblers, drugs are gone. Next door it won't be long. Decayed spoils of greed are left, found like a lost pirate's chest. Space age cars from the past glide around inside new parts. A simple love at home is best. This life is proof to stand that test. Dance of life, unstoppable. The love of man, untoppable. Food there may be none to spare. Children playing don't seem to care. The hungry world outside invites, with glory always in its sights. Freedom fight was fought for the right of free thought. Everywhere is ice cream, the smiling people be. A simple love at home is best. This life is proof to stand that test.
Track 10, we touched on it at the start, but Lucifer Waits, which is a favourite of mine from the album.
Yeah, a lot of people, interestingly. It's a straight-ahead rocker kind of thing with a gothic tinge, I suppose. But yeah, well, you know, I wrote that as a poem, you know, woke up angrily one day and just after hearing the news the night before or something like that, and I said, whether they're stupid or not in the know, that's no excuse. There's a place they will go, which is completely against my compassionate nature to be forgiving. But, you know, we spoke about that in part one about the difference between narcissists and psychopaths and things like that, whereas, you know, one's forgivable and the other kind of not really.
Oh, it's very karmic, isn't it? You know.
So there's a line in there where, you know, it's mostly about the killing and maiming, because for some reason, if people don't die, you kind of like, they get a second that you can forgive them. But if people die, and then those people haven't got a chance to, you know, for some reason, survival, I suppose, what it comes down to. And then, so love is the only reason to fight. I thought that's a bit of a joke, nice little joke. There's a lot to unpack in there for people. And then not sensorial pleasures in the night, because my perspective of most poor-minded people is their egos run it. And to bolster your ego, for men, particularly it's men that seem to be these evil perpetrators, killing and maiming innocent people, that their egos are propped up and validified, by their conquests, sexual conquests, or whether they pay for it or whatever. Apparently Napoleon had a woman waiting in an antechamber to his office after every night, and it's quite a common thing. And that's what I think that their motivations, these egomaniacs, is to be attractive to women on a powerful level, you know. And that's what I mean by, you know, the only reason to fight is for love and not sensorial pleasures in the night, which is the motivation of egotistical people, egotistical men, I suppose. So, that's that one.
Whether they're stupid or not in the know, it's no excuse. There's a place they will go. Everyone knows what's right or wrong. Can't hide themselves from where they belong. We know where they're going. Oh well, you know they're going. They're going to hell. Killing or maiming a poor innocent. Know where their eternity will be spent. Love is the only reason to fight, not sensorial pleasures in the night. We know where they're going, oh so well. You know they're going to hell. Lucifer waits, he's calling you out. Money and power cannot satisfy their hunger for existence before they die. Only self-regard can be their toast. Winners in the end are those with the most. We know where they're going all too well. You know they're going to hell. We know where they're going, oh well. You know they're going to hell. They're going to hell. They're going, oh well.
We arrive at track 11, which is the closing
Last track.
Yes.
That's last.
And it's a great album closer.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very positive way to close out the album, in my view. So the track's We
Mm-hmm.
All, and so what can you share with us about that?
Well, I might have even written it as a closing theme. You know, lyrically, that might have been the inspiration that it was going to be the last track and give it a bit of a epilogue or something. And and Dave, all the music is totally Dave. All I did is write the lyrics for that one. And it sounds, it's very Beatley, of course, isn't it?
Yes.
You know, nice Beatley thing. You know, this is one thing I might have given Paul McCartney a bit of a beat up compared to, you know, John, who I adore so much. But John was always, you know, quite often in pain. And Paul seemed to be trying to juxtapose that by being more of a let it be, you know, that kind of thing. And Hey Jude, they were kind of like healing. He was more of a healing kind of guy
Yes.
in his lyrics. And so, and Dave and I both have elements of both sides pretty equally, I think. And so I think it sounds very Sgt. Peppery, you know, Beatley kind of thing.
Yeah.
And so, well, also a bit like Yes. I thought the band Yes had some good healing. Ian Anderson wrote some nice healing kind of things.
Especially in their early days.
I've Seen All Good People. That's a great song.
Yeah.
But it's also inspiring courage, you know, like, you know, searching far at times that home is lost from sight, you know, and yet when you're out there, you can see a beacon of light that you know where to go once you've left it all behind. I know I've talked a lot about these lyrics now, but I was really glad that I had an opportunity to do lyrics and to talk about them with you. And as I say, I'm not sure if I'll be doing any other interviews apart from this one, and I thought I'll give it as much attention as you allow me. So it says, we all can love the world, we all can share the love, which Dave tacked that into it. But my last line was, we know it's change we need to make the world be fair. So, you know, and I think, again, in these times of Biden's presidency, achieving presidency, I don't feel that's a hollow kind of hope at all.
No, it seems very poignant, actually, yeah.
Yeah. So sometimes you can be lucky when you get these confluence of things. I would love for syncretism to be a part of this whole era that we're in now, significant. And it has been for me. It's been weird, it's very prescient,
Well, it is. It's out there. It's in the world. So, yeah.
Life can be harvested another day and night, searching so far at times that home is lost from sight, and living on the edges where one can find a care, a beacon way out there that sends a light. We've had some arguments, tradition at great expense. These are extraordinary times to be shared. We know it's change we need to make the world be fair. Life can be harvesting another day and night, searching so far at times that home is lost from sight. These are extraordinary times to be shared. We know it's change we need to make the world be fair. We all can love the world, we all can share the love. We know it's love we need.
And thank you, Steve. I know you're a musician too, so and a drummer.
Yes.
You let and I too. We drummers, we know we're the life of the party. Whenever I tell anyone in the band, you can't have a good band without a good drummer because they're the life of the party. They'll make you sound like you stink, or they'll prop you up, in the heavens.
A friend of mine years ago said, the drummer in a band or in any music setup is always the most important person, the most popular person. I said, how'd you come around to that, realisation? He goes, well, everyone taps their foot, don't they?
Everyone's what?
Everyone's tapping their foot.
Yes, because they have to lock into that timeline.
That rhythm, yeah.
The rhythm's one thing, but whether it's too fast or too slow, it's just the perfect timing. Timing is like, underrated. But bass players, they're the secret weapon that people aren't really aware of because they're part of that rhythm section. Also, they're counterpointing the melody of the singer. If you listen to this, when the singer stops singing, see what's between the singing. If it's not the bass player, they have to have something else, doing something to carry the event.
I know in recent years I've really rediscovered the bass player, if you like, and actually really in love with bass playing in general. So much so that even in my own work, I've really put a lot more focus on what the bass is doing. In the early days, it was just there to follow the bass drum, but these days it's a lot more than that,
It was the 80s. Yeah, the 80s were like self-taught bass players, whereas the 60s were like really technical. And as I say, I've been in part one. Here we go again. I mentioned about the guitar scales that I've been teaching based on a syncretism of theories of like classical theory, blues, jazz theory with this Beatles kind of theory. And I said, well, I probably gave John Lennon a lot more credit for this than it's kind of it was occurring before John Lennon, but he did it more in a folk troubadour idiom. I'm sure troubadours used to use these chord progressions that were naive and very difficult to harmonise, but they were just singing along with it and playing. And troubadour didn't necessarily have other people playing along, but bass players have always had to be able to have a different scale for every chord. In the 60s, you listen to the bass players in the 60s, they're astounding. And the tones they have, sometimes you think it's just bass, but they've got this click. Like Carol Kay, the bass player from an American Wrecking Crew, and used to be a guitar player, and then she ended up on bass and was quite happy that. And she wrote all the tutorial books for bass teaching. And she had this thing called a click bass, which I've never seen or heard it and been able to find it written anywhere else. But when you hear a bass, they had like this high frequency, especially if you're listening to Tom Jones' music, there was an English bass player on all those sessions, I don't know who his name is, who had that same tone. But have a listen to the bass, you hear this clicking on some of them, especially in the 60s, and it's very easy to hear when there's no other instrumentation. You really notice it. I never realised that was the bass. So they're not just doing the bass end of the playing along with the drums. They've got this click going along the top with the drums as well.
Yeah, indeed.
I always enjoyed. Go on, sorry.
No, go on.
I was going to say I always enjoyed Ringo Starr's drumming and Paul McCartney's bass, and particularly on songs like Old Brown Shoe, where the bass is going da-dum, 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 it's going a bit all over the. I can't explain it technically, but
he's a very lyrical bass player.
Yes.
He was a very melodic bass player. And Ringo Starr, I got taught drums traditionally by in the 60s, and my drum teacher taught me Latin American rhythms, which was also what Ringo was very aware of, Latin American rhythms, and which was also the rejuvenation of jazz music happened in Brazil when they combined jazz guitar particularly, but jazz piano with their Latin American rhythms that they had from Europe, I suppose, the Spanish Latino influence. In Cuba, the incredible musicianship in Cuba, because all the kids they don't learn classical guitar, they learn jazz. Yeah, the best modern music I ever heard was from the Cuban National Orchestra, who come out with the dance group from Cuba, and they reconstruct all these songs like Purple Rain, for instance. They deconstruct it in the jazz deconstruction and reconstruct it with all of this stuff, kind of like our John Coltrane did with All of Me and those kind of songs. The jazz reconstruction of these things, and it was just phenomenal. I'm sure the keyboard player was the guy who did it, because you realise, and that was in the 60s, you listen to the 60s music and you listen especially to the bass and the orchestrations. I'm a product of that. So is Dave, actually. To finish off this syncretism thing, I've just realised we haven't done some of the other things I've been working on in the last year with Maya and Emma Tomlinson. Are we going to get time to do that today?
I think we might have to do that on part 3, if that's okay. Because I actually did say on Facebook that it was going to be a 3-parter. So,
did you?
Is that well, we said 2-part. in the spoken word, but because we were originally going to have solo, church, and then Syncretism plus. But if it's okay with you, because I've got an appointment that I've got to get to.
I know. But in another way, I just think Maya, I just play most of the instruments for Maya on her recordings, and I'm her producer and her manager.
Yeah.
And that's about all that we need to say about that. Because,
Okay,
you could just play her song and tell
well, there's two
people
songs
about that if they're interested. Yeah.
Indeed. And the latest one I really enjoy and has a very much Judy Zook type vibe to it, in my opinion.
See, I hear her as like a Sade and maybe Dido kind of things. But we're working on a new song that's kind of very much that hybrid of hip-hop and rock, pop, soul.
Yes.
I don't know how to describe it here. But so I'm very, very, very fulfilled with music now, more than probably ever in my life, as a result of Syncretism and Maya.
Fantastic.
Well, we will play Maya,
Absolutely.
Steve.
Yeah.
And the other artist is Emma Tomlinson?
Yeah.
Yes.
Emma Tomlinson was one of the a prodigy singing and songwriting student at one of the high schools that I was at, and she's released a 5-track EP, and one of the songs I'd actually helped her develop at the school, which is one of the strong songs from this EP.
Yes.
And that's called Silver Lightning. And she even wants to give me a co-write on it, but I really think that she, wrote it all. And she's just being very gracious toward me. Well, I played nylon string guitar and Ebo guitar, and she's got like a capacity to sing operatic voice, like Kate Miller-Heidke.
Yes.
And I'm doing high-pitched Ebo right above the pickups with a slide guitar again, and that's where her song pitch was as well. We were dancing, with her operatic high voice and my Ebo slide vibrato right up above the fretboard, beyond the fretboard. So yeah, she's excellent.
Well, thank you very much for joining us for part 2,
Yeah,
Peter.
it's been a real pleasure, Pete.
We hope the
Thank you,
album
Steve.
does very well for you. Available only digitally. That's correct, isn't it? It's not CD.
Yes, I'm a greenie. I don't believe in producing
okay.
vinyl and shipping stuff around in cart trucks and warehousing and all that. So music's imaginary, but we've got the booklet.
We do.
Well,
it's a great booklet. Yep, it's fantastic.
And you can download full CD quality WAVs,
Exactly.
WAVs as they call them,
Labs.
at the website syncretismmusic.com.
Excellent.
Or on your favourite platform.
Indeed. Well, thank you. The album is called Lone Drifters, so check it out.
Question mark.
Sorry, I keep forgetting the question mark. Love it. Thanks, Peter. Really appreciate your time.
And aren't we all lone drifters? Question mark.
Indeed.